Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Our Voices, Our Histories, Asian American and Pacific Islander Women. Edited by Shirley Hune and Gail M. Nomura. Narrated by Raechel Wong. Publisher's note. In this audio edition, you will hear references to tables present in the print and ebook formats of the book. Introduction. Our Voices. Gail M. Nomura. Our Voices, Our Histories, Asian American and Pacific Islander Women brings together 35 Asian American and Pacific Islander authors in a single volume to explore the historical experiences, consciousness, and actions of Asian American and Pacific Islander women in the United States and beyond. It examines the intersections of race, gender, class, sexuality, indigeneity, ethnicity, and other aspects of the lives of these women. Through the voices and lives of the women themselves, these works foreground the agency, power, and resilience of Asian American and Pacific Islander women, and their capacity to enact change and transform their lives and communities within local, transnational, and global contexts. In addressing the diverse histories of Asian American and Pacific Islander women in this anthology, the editors recognize the heterogeneity within and between these socially and politically constructed pan-ethnic umbrella groupings. We do not seek to subsume, obliterate, or obscure their distinctiveness, but to expand the research and interpretive boundaries leading to new ways of understanding a complex, richer history of the United States. In addition to the many possibilities of dialogue, alliances, and connections through differences, we also seek to explore commonalities and shared agendas, without perpetuating or reinscribing the same hierarchies and exclusions that have sometimes marred such projects. Effective coalition building constructs a shared agenda that is a work in progress, constantly negotiated and debated. It requires continuous interchanges to explore boundaries, frontiers, and borderlands of interactions and separations to open new conversations and collaborations. This book is a step toward exploring these interactions and separations, which will enable listeners to begin to question and push theoretical constructs and interpretations beyond the analyses of single ethnic groups. It will also allow listeners to more deeply consider the power of individual intentional action within, at times, seemingly overwhelming limits and constraints. The selections present new research that studies diverse aspects of Asian American and Pacific Islander American women's history, while acknowledging shared experiences as women of color in the United States. The authors bring fresh, alternative insights, ways of knowing, analyses, and narratives, as well as research sources, approaches, and strategies. In this way, they reveal the agency, resistance, and resilience of Asian American and Pacific Islander women in all their diversity, and, in the process, a new understanding of women's history. Diversity. The Asian American and Pacific Islander women presented in this anthology comprise diverse groups of people of many cultures, ethnicities, languages, and religions that have a history with the United States. Diversity within and between groups is a key point to remember. Asian American is a socially and politically constructed pan-ethnic umbrella term, emerging out of the social movements of the 1960s and early 1970s in the United States. It generally refers to immigrants and U.S.-born people of Chinese, Filipino, Japanese, Korean, Mongolian, South Asian, for example, Bangladeshi, Bhutanese, Indian, Maldivian, Nepalese, Pakistani, Sri Lankan, Southeast Asian, for example, Burmese/Myanmarese, Hmong, Indonesian, Khmer/Cambodian, Lao, Malaysian, Mien, Singaporean, Thai, Vietnamese, Taiwanese, and Tibetan ancestry, among others. Some may expand the term to include peoples of Asian descent in all the Americas, and others have defined Asian as comprising peoples from the entire geographical region of Asia, including West Asia/the Middle East. Pacific Islander and Pacific Islander American are socially and politically constructed terms designating U.S.-born and immigrant people who have ancestry among the indigenous peoples from Oceania, Micronesia, Melanesia, and Polynesia. Most Pacific Islanders subscribe to a distinct island-based indigenous identity. For example, Native Hawaiian, Samoan, Chamorro, Tongan, Fijian, or Maori, rather than to a pan-ethnic identity. Pacific Islanders see clear sociocultural, political, and historical distinctions between and among different islander groups. However, the pan-ethnic terms have come into use in recent years to forge a pan-Pacific Islander identity and coalitions, notably in the continental United States, while maintaining island-based identities. In particular, Pacific Islander and Pacific Islander American refer to indigenous peoples of Pacific Islands with a history of U.S. colonialism. 1. The state of Hawaii, incorporated into the United States in 1898 through a joint congressional resolution, organized as a U.S. territory in 1900, became the 50th state in 1959. 2. The U.S. territory of Guam, acquired by the United States by treaty from Spain in 1898, established as an unincorporated organized U.S. territory in 1950. 3. The Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, CNMI, main islands Saipan, Tinian, and Rota, acquired by Germany from Spain in 1899, acquired by Japan after World War I as a League of Nations mandate, administered by the United States after World War II as part of the United Nations Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, approved by the UN and the U.S. Congress and by plebiscite to form the Commonwealth in political union with the United States, with a new constitution and government taking effect in 1978, and covenant agreement fully effective in 1986. 4. American Samoa, acquired by the United States in 1899, became an unorganized and unincorporated U.S. territory in 1900. The indigenous peoples of Hawaii, Guam, and the CNMI are U.S. citizens, except for a small number of people living in the CNMI who, in 1986, voluntarily chose to give up their newly acquired U.S. citizenship and remained non-citizen U.S. nationals. Indigenous Samoans born in American Samoa are non-citizen U.S. nationals. The terms Pacific Islander and Pacific Islander American also include the indigenous citizens of the three sovereign nations that comprise the Freely Associated States, or FAS. 1. The Federated States of Micronesia, or FSM, composed of the states of Yap, Chuuk, Pohnpei, and Kosrae. 2. The Republic of the Marshall Islands, or RMI. 3. The Republic of Palau, or ROP. The citizens of all three of the FAS nations currently have the rights to travel freely to live, work, and study in the United States and its territories or possessions under non-immigrant status, according to the terms of their individual nations' compacts of free association with the United States. Also, all Pacific Islander immigrants, indigenous peoples from Oceania, and their descendants born in the United States are included in the terms Pacific Islander and Pacific Islander American. A tension can exist between legal categories and self-identity when defining an American. For example, permanent residents may self-identify as American, and given issues of sovereignty and struggles for self-determination, some Pacific Islanders in U.S. colonized territories may not self-identify as American. The complexity of Asian American and Pacific Islander is illustrated by noting the many ethnicities included in the larger subcategories of Asian American, for example, Southeast Asian American, and the many different indigenous island groups encompassed by Pacific Islander. The pan-ethnic terms often obscure distinctions within these synthetic groupings. For example, the term South Asian American is often taken to mean Indian American, the most numerous ethnic group under that designation. Even the term Indian American masks, for example, regional, religious, and linguistic distinctions. Likewise, many take Pacific Islander to mean the numerically dominant subgroup Native Hawaiian, and the term Chamorro includes the Chamorro of Guam and the Chamorro of the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, although separated politically since 1898 by imperial powers. Furthermore, the term Samoan includes those who are U.S. nationals from American Samoa, and those who come as immigrants to the United States from the independent state of Samoa. Further, if one interrogates a single ethnic category, such as Chinese American, one finds ethnic Chinese of varying national origins. For example, ethnic Chinese from Vietnam or the Philippines, and sometimes multiple national journeys. For example, Chinese who went to the United Kingdom, then Canada, then the United States, as well as those who conflate Taiwanese American with Chinese American. Distinct ethnicities emerge even in what seems to be an unambiguously homogeneous group, as in the case of Japanese Americans. Their genetic category often subsumes and obscures the distinct Okinawan American grouping. Adding to the inability to neatly define stable categories of classification are the growing numbers of multiracial, multi-ethnic peoples, who trace their ancestries in part to Asia and/or the Pacific Islands. While in 1990, 10% of Asian Americans were multiracial, it is projected that by 2060, that rate will be nearly 20%. In 2015, 50% of Pacific Islanders were multiracial, and that rate is expected to increase to 54.5% by 2040. Generational differences further complicate relations within and among these groups. For example, some Asian Americans have histories of 7, 8, or more generations in the United States. But particularly since the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 lifted many discriminatory policies and quotas against Asians, there has been a growing number of recent immigrants who brought their children with them, the 1.5 generation, those who were born in Asia but came as young children to the United States, and acculturated rapidly. After the Vietnam War, the fall of Saigon in 1975 prompted a sudden wave of refugees from Southeast Asia, and in the present, other refugees have come from Bhutan, Myanmar, Burma, and Nepal. Thus, the number of Asia-born immigrants in the United States increased exponentially. The Asian American population shifted from a small but predominantly U.S.-born population in 1960 to one of the fastest-growing racial groups in the United States, with at times almost two-thirds being immigrants. Though since 2000 there has been an increasing number of U.S.-born. Current projections indicate that by 2040, there will be an even numerical parity of U.S.-born and Asia-born. With this influx of new immigrants and refugees from Asia, enhanced by U.S. immigration policies that supported family reunification, the Asian American population more than doubled from 1.5 million in 1970 to 3.7 million in 1980, and nearly doubled again to 7.3 million in 1990. The Asian American population more than doubled again from 1990 to 2010, when the U.S. Census counted 17,320,856 Asian Americans, including mixed-race persons identifying as part Asian. Almost half those Asian Americans lived in the western United States, and 52% were women. In 2017, the estimated number of Asian Americans was 22.4 million. The largest ethnic Asian American group, alone or in any combination, was Chinese, 5 million, excluding those who reported Taiwanese only, followed by Asian Indian, 4.4 million, Filipino, 4 million, Vietnamese, 2.1 million, Korean, 1.8 million, and Japanese, 1.5 million. More than 874,414 Pacific Islanders were enumerated in the 2000 U.S. Census. Slightly less than 50%, 434,733, were women in 2000. Their numbers grew to 1,225,195 in 2010, and were an estimated 1.5 million in 2017. The largest group of Pacific Islanders in 2017 was Native Hawaiians, 614,572, followed by Samoans, 202,268, Chamorro or Guamanian, 156,482, Tongan, 71,474, other Micronesian, 64,915, Fijian, 50,034, Marshallese, 34,970, other Polynesian, 21,888, and other Melanesian, 1,656, with another 249,558 not specified other Pacific Islander. Among Pacific Islanders, one finds generational and regional differences between the indigenous island resident and the off-island Pacific Islander living in or born and raised in the continental United States. Our voices. In coming together in this anthology, we and our authors collectively lift our voices with our subjects to narrate the complex history of Asian American and Pacific Islander women's history. Asian American and Pacific Islander women's voices and lives contest stereotyped mainstream views of them to reveal their strength, resilience, and transformative will and action in meeting the challenges of immigration/migration, colonialism, wars, economic globalization, transnationalism, racism, patriarchy, class, gender, and sexuality, family/community building, and changing intergenerational relations. Our authors share the voices of these women, which articulate that women are active agents in shaping their own lives and impacting their community, nation, and world, and not subordinate passive pawns of history. Their agency, their capacity to make their own strategic, intentional choices within changing opportunities and constraints presented, and to act on those choices, is a theme threading through all chapters in the volume. Our authors express the wide range of voices of Asian American and Pacific Islander women. In the chapters, we hear the voices of women who are indigenous, U.S.-born, immigrant, refugee, 1.5 and second generation, LGBTQ, mixed race, transracial adoptee, engaged in political action in the grassroots and legislative areas, experiencing trauma and healing, challenging race, gender roles, and class constraints, and contributing to the empowerment of women and community uplift, among others. Pacific Islander women voice the importance of understanding indigenous worldviews, historical stories, oral narratives, cultural practices and values, and connections with deities and the land, counter to Western thought, which represses alternative worldviews and relationships. Some of our authors, including the editors, reveal their own stories and voices alongside their subjects. In challenging our authors to step out of their academic third-person point of view positionality to share their stories and first-person points of view, the editors sought to bring to our listeners a more palpable connection to and understanding of Asian American and Pacific Islander women. One of our authors, Dawn Bohulanu Mabalan, expressed this view. I also feel the hurt of a generation. It's our story, and it demands our love and attention and respect, and we need to tell this story. The passionate voices and personal stories of our authors add to the richness and depth of the stories they tell in their chapters. In particular, we recognize the courage of some of our authors in revealing their own intimate and sometimes painful experiences in their analyses of their subjects and, in some cases, their self-stories. In order to learn the history of Asian American and Pacific Islander women, we need to hear these voices. We must be respectful and listen, really listen, to the women and not impose our ill-informed ideas. The powerful voices and lived experiences of Asian American and Pacific Islander women in dialogue in this anthology illuminate the agency of these women throughout history and their multifaceted cultural formations and identities. The voices, dignity, and humanity of the women are at the core of the histories we have presented in this anthology. Their lives have meaning. Introduction. Our Histories. Shirley Hune. The editors have developed Our Voices, Our Histories, Asian American and Pacific Islander women to re-envision women's histories and to advance aspects and understandings of their lives through new approaches, methods, and resources. As we heard in the previous introduction, Asian American and Pacific Islander groups are complex and have unique voices and experiences. While maintaining their own cultural institutions and community organizations, they also collaborate intentionally for common goals and in resistance to discriminatory policies and treatment. As Asian American and Pacific Islander populations have grown numerically in the United States after the passage of the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act, their members have become more multifaceted in national and ethnic origin. Status and condition of arrival and treatment in America, education, occupation and income, religion and spirituality, generation in America, family formations, and other characteristics. There is no single encompassing Asian American and Pacific Islander women's experience. Recent trends emphasize their diversity, but there are features of their experiences that are similar. The purpose of this volume is to contribute to a fuller comprehension of Asian American and Pacific Islander women's lives by bringing together a collection of their histories that incorporates cutting-edge research approaches, focuses on their different communities, as well as specific experiences in common, and highlights the women's voices and perspectives. In this introduction, I consider new dimensions in the scholarly focus of U.S. history, Asian American and Pacific Islander studies, and women's and gender studies that are reinterpreting Asian American and Pacific Islander women's histories, and explain how this book reflects these new approaches. The content of this anthology, its scope and coverage of ethnic groups and topics, and 3 interlocking themes, agency, resistance and resilience, and identity, are discussed. These themes flow through the chapters and elucidate the kinds of experiences the women have in common, in conjunction with their unique histories and lives. Finally, I outline how the volume is organized. In short, this book is a new anthology of original work grounded in historical studies that seeks to transform current understandings of Asian American and Pacific Islander women's histories. New dimensions: globalism and transnationalism, exclusion, empire and colonialism, and gender and intersectionality. In developing this anthology, the editors considered how new approaches in U.S. history, Asian American and Pacific Islander studies, and women's and gender studies inform research on Asian American and Pacific Islander women. I use the term dimensions to discuss cutting-edge approaches and recent research in history that are contributing to revisionist studies of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in general, and women specifically. 3 of them help to frame the structure and organization of this volume. They have been developing for more than 2 decades and are not necessarily new. What is novel is our application of these approaches to Asian American and Pacific Islander women's histories. The new dimensions are akin to paradigm shifts that dramatically change previous interpretations, in this case of Asian American and Pacific Islander women's lives. I discuss them briefly next. It is not possible, however, to do justice to these new approaches in this limited space. For more details, I have included extensive endnotes and citations of pertinent revisionist studies. Globalism and transnationalism dimension. Asian American and Pacific Islander histories have generally been studied through the lens of U.S. national history. As global historians challenge the dominance of nation-framed history, revisionist studies call for reinterpreting U.S. history as part of a global or world history of colonial relations, trade, labor migration, and other dynamics. Transnationalism involves relationships and the integration of people and political, economic, and cultural forms across national borders. Consequently, transnational aspects of Asian American and Pacific Islander women's histories, for example, memories and connections, become more visible and relevant. U.S. immigrant and refugee experiences have always been transnational, whatever the circumstances of their leavings and resettlements. But dominant ideologies have focused on their American lives and marginalized their global dimension. Diaspora studies is also of value. Its emphasis on immigrants with a shared history, culture, and geography who have dispersed to many distant lands, thus placing it outside the scope of this volume. New studies of both pre-mid-19th century migrants and post-1965 communities are recontextualizing Asian American and Pacific Islander histories within globalism and transnationalism. Chapters include these contexts for early Chinese, Filipino, Indian, Japanese, and Korean women and present-day experiences of females of Bangladeshi, Chamorro, Chinese, Filipino, Hmong, Indian, Japanese, Khmer/Cambodian, Korean, Laotian, Samoan, Taiwanese, Thai, Tongan, and Vietnamese backgrounds, integrating them with their lives in the United States. Several chapters discuss transnational and local dynamics in areas, such as the role of food, the politics of language, being a transracial adoptee, lesbian or of mixed race, and organizing across ethnic groups and national borders, to include a larger range of women's activities than has generally been addressed. Exclusion, Empire, and Colonial Dimension. Reflecting the nation-state focus of both U.S. history and immigration studies, earlier frameworks of Asian Americans emphasized immigrant chronicles and assimilation and adaptation, albeit interlocked with their resistance to racism and other iniquities. The idea of the United States as a welcoming nation of immigrants has been systematically countered. In particular, Asian exclusion policies have long contradicted this concept. Revisionist studies, including indigenous and post-colonial critiques, highlight exclusion, empire, and colonialism in national and global history, especially the impact of imperialism, wars, military interventions, and colonial occupations on the displacement, forced relocation, and accompanying violence and trauma experienced by specific Asian American and Pacific Islander groups. Chapters document the varied experiences of Asian American and Pacific Islander women under empire, in earlier eras and less studied locations. They also feature recent histories of Filipino, South and Southeast Asian, and Pacific Islander women whose lives were considerably changed by empire, war, and colonial occupation. The dimension of exclusion, empire, and colonialism also shifts the geography of Asian American and Pacific Islander studies from solely the U.S. continent to the larger Pacific world, its oceans, islands, and lands. This approach is more inclusive of former U.S. colonies and territories, their histories, populations, and issues, including addressing American influence in their homelands. Several chapters offer new interpretations of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander women's activities, resistance and resilience, and identities through their histories and voices. Gender and intersectionality dimension. As women's and gender studies give more attention to non-white, non-Western women and their situations, locally, nationally, and globally, they bring visibility to female migrants around the globe. Feminists have also adopted gender as an analytical category for considering women's disparities, especially the ideologies and practices that privilege men and disadvantage women. In this volume, the editors build upon our efforts to view Asian American and Pacific Islander women as historical subjects actively negotiating better lives for themselves, their families, and their communities within constraints of gender biases, laws, and customs, a construct we introduced in Asian/Pacific American Women, a historical anthology, 2003. Chapters extend that construct to richly detail Asian American and Pacific Islander women's agency, resistance and resilience, and identity as common themes as they confront gender boundaries in their families, communities, work situations, and public spaces in U.S. society and their homelands. As a component of gender studies, intersectionality focuses on different hierarchies of power, such as race, gender, sexuality, class, religion, ability, etc., as they combine and overlap, conflict or contest, accumulate over time, and complicate women's struggle for equality in a male-dominated Western world. We incorporate intersectionality in this book to reveal the complexity of Asian American and Pacific Islander women's lives, as they may hold different advantages and disadvantages in particular eras, places, and situations. For example, several chapters discuss how religious affiliation or spirituality intersects with race, class, gender, and other hierarchies in different...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?